Okay, well, in this video, I'm going to model a perfume bottle using subdivision surfaces. I'm going to go probably a little bit quicker in this video than I have in the other videos, and I'm going to use many of the same techniques in this video that I used in the first few videos. So if I do anything that you're not really sure of or it doesn't make sense, I recommend just going back and watching the first few videos, because it might be a technique that I was covering there. So I have an idea of the shape of this bottle already, and I'm just gonna, create a basic box that is about the proportion that I'm thinking of for the bottle, and you'll see how it starts progressing. It's gonna be, I don't want to say coffin-like, but it's gonna be kind of coffin-like. I'm gonna put an extra cut right there. And I'm going to select the top and bottom polygons, and I'm going to size those down a little bit. So this is actually kind of the general shape that I'm going to be going for, except I'm going to make sure everything's a lot more rounded. It's going to round off a lot more in the center part. And at this point, we're going to start adding a bunch of control loops to the object. So I am going to use Bandsaw Pro and add in my control loops on all the sides. That looks about right. I'm going to mirror that. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to accept that. One of the things that Bandsaw Pro will do is, if you notice, like at the very top, this distance right here is a little bit smaller than this distance, and that's because the dimension of this side or this edge was shorter than this edge, so it keeps everything proportional. So it probably doesn't matter too much, but I'm just gonna select all the points on that side. I'm gonna stretch them out just a little bit to get them to be a little bit closer, a little bit more equal. Probably looks a little bit better. And then I'm gonna add some control loops on the other side. Oops, wrong one. And just like in previous videos, I'm going to try to get the control loop space so they're about the same distance on all sides. That looks good, so I'm going to mirror it for the other side. Accept that. And again, I'm going to go into the right view this time and select those 2 points and just stretch them out a little bit so the distance is right about the same. That looks pretty good. For the control loops for the top and bottom, I'm just going to use the knife tool, and it'll go pretty quick. Cut that right across there. Too many. Alright, that looks good. So if we were to enter subpatch mode right now, it's holding its shape, but it's really rounding off way too much in this side, right in the middle. And that is because we don't have any control loops around this edge. So what I'm going to do again is add a few more loop cuts going right across, but I want it to be a fairly big curve in there, a fairly large amount of rounding. So I'm going to make the control loops spaced out a little bit more than what we had on the rest of the model, and you'll see how that will affect it. And That looks pretty good. And you can see how we have a nice rounded shape. But this curve is a lot wider, a lot smoother than these corner curves. One plugin that I do use, or it's actually an L script, is to do a loop slide. And one thing I don't think Lightwave has that I'm aware of is something to do slide essentially this loop, which is all these edges that go all the way around this object. That creates one loop. If we weren't happy with this curve right in here, you may want to move this loop up or down, actually both of these loops, or further or closer to this main edge. And the truth is, there's no real easy way, at least that I'm aware of, to do that. So this one plugin, and I could post the link to it, does a very nice slide function. So essentially, it'll take this loop and it'll slide it up and down. But I'll go into the full screen mode so you can see what happens in all the views. And this is my the L script right there that I have. And you'll see as I change the percentage, it's actually going to move up and down. But in all the views, it's going to follow the exact geometry of the object. So it won't change the shape of the main object at all. It's just going to slide that loop up and down. So if I thought that curved area was way too curvy, rather than delete those points and start again, I could simply slide it closer, accept that, and then I could do the same thing with the other loop. And I think it was about 30, so I'll do -30. And essentially, we move those a little bit closer. If I go into subpatch mode again, you can see that the curve is there, but it's a little bit tighter curve. So I'm actually going to undo those because I do want that curve to be about that size. But this is a really useful script that I've grown fond of. So the next thing we're going to do is start creating the part of the perfume bottle where the top extrudes from. So I'm going to use Bandsaw Pro again. Clear that out. I'm just going to do a single cut right through the middle. And if you knew in the beginning you wanted to do it this way, I could have done 3 cuts initially rather than do the 2 sides. But I kind of wanted you to see the process that I was kind of going through. And I'm going to do the same thing around the other side. And now I'm going to create the top of the perfume bottle. So I'm going to connect those points together. Connect those points together. And with rounder, I'm going to bevel that out. Make sure the mesh density is set to low and the rounding polygons is set to 1. And I'm actually using a slightly different technique this time than what I've used in the past. But this size looks about right. I'm going to accept that. And alright, you may be saying, okay, that doesn't look like much of a circle. But one of the new tools, it might be new to 9 or 9.2, not positive, is the untangle. And the untangle, I think, is a weird word, so I actually added the word circle after that. But it will take any polygon you have, and it will turn into as close to a circle as it can. And it's usually in the utilities plugins. I just added it to the menu right here. So I'm just gonna hit that button, and you can see right away that polygon became as close to a circle as possible without having to do any work, which is pretty nice for circumstances like this. So I'm gonna go back, and then I'm going to use multi-shift and create some of the beginnings of my edge loops. I'm going to keep these a little bit tighter together. This is the top part of the perfume bottle. A little bit shorter. And the top part. That's part of the control loop. So I'm actually going to accept that at this point and deselect everything. If we go into subpatch mode, you can see how we have the beginning part of like the top of the perfume bottle. So at this point, there's another plugin that I use in these cases, and there might be other ways to do it, but I've just found this way to be pretty useful. I'm gonna select that top polygon and actually just delete it, and then I am going to use a plugin called Thickener. And again, once you load it, it would be in the Utilities and Plugins menu. I've added it to my side menu. So, and I'll try to post information or a link to the plugin. Now, typically, what I would do in an application that had an option such as this is I would simply inset this as thick as I wanted the glass of this bottle to be. But what I found is, I mean, let's say I wanted it about, let's see, about like this thickness. I'm just going to accept this for now. Deselect everything. And if we go into, where would be the best way to see it? Actually, let's go into full screen mode. And I'm actually going to zoom into the middle of the bottle. So we're actually inside the bottle now. What this plugin has a tendency to do is it has a tendency to create a lot of overlapping geometry in here, which when you go into subpatch mode, it may kind of smooth out, but in my view, it just makes for really bad topology. So in this case, what I found is a better solution is rather than make the glass that thick, I'm just going to undo that. I'm going to go back to thickener, and I'm going to only inset it a very small amount, so the distortion is very, very small. This should be a good enough amount, small enough that the distortion won't be too big, and it's enough that we'll be able to select the difference between the inside and the outside. So I'm going to select that at this point. I'm going to deselect everything. And now essentially the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and select the inside of that bottle and make it a little bit smaller, giving me the thickness that I want for the bottle. Before I do that, I'm just going to rest this on the ground and center it up. That was F3 to do that. And now I'm just going to go in, I'm going to select within the perspective view, I'm going to select those 4 bottom polygons, and I'm going to use the selection, which is just the shift close bracket, and that will slowly increase your selection. You can see the selection is slowly growing. And I'm going to do that until we have essentially the, I'll do one more. Until we have all the geometry that we wanted. And again, this is on the inside of the bottle, so that you're seeing some lines that are doubled up. If you go too far with the shift close bracket, the shift open bracket will subtract the geometry one by one. So now that I have basically the inside of the bottle, not including the inside of the top part selected, I'm going to go into the side views, and with the stretch tool, I'm going to bring that in a little bit and just determine the thickness of the glass. That looks pretty good to me. And then I'm going to shrink the height of it a little bit also. And that looks pretty good. And before I accept it, I'm just going to go into the right view and shrink it up that way also, so the front and back of the glass has some thickness. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to deselect everything at this point. And then I'm going to go in, and I think I just want to see what's going on in there again. I'm going to go, basically I zoomed so you're just inside the bottle, and as you can see right now, we use the same technique, the same thickener plugin, but all the geometry in the corners is nice and clean. Pretty much as clean as it was on the outside of the bottle, which is really what we want. So I'm just going to rotate this so we can kind of see the top of the bottle, but from the inside. And I'm going to select these two polygons. I'm going to do a loop select, and I'm going to again select the geometry and grow that selection. And now I'm going to shrink up the inside of that top part. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go into the side view. And that looks pretty good. I was actually using this non-selected edge as a guide. I was kind of centering it along the middle, making my selection go equal distance on that. So this should be pretty circular at this point still. So that looks pretty good. We need to make a few more adjustments. So I'm going to select that edge and do a loop select. And this actually should be the same distance apart as the rest of the inside. So, and it's not. So I'm just going to size it up ever so slightly. And if you look in the back view, I'm making sure that in the back view that it becomes completely vertical. And that looks pretty good. And then this, I'm going to do another loop select. This is actually the control loop for the loop right below it. And because of the way we resized it, it didn't stay close to that edge. So I'm just going to size that down so those control loops stay accurate. It looks like we have a little bit of distortion going on. Just need to fix that bottom control loop, so I'm stretching it out on the right view. So that looks pretty good. So now if we go back into the inside view, from the inside, this bottle top looks as accurate and as clean as it did on the outside. So the only other thing I'm going to do is, at this point, is select this top loop. Actually, we don't even need to do that. We could even just select two polygons right there. And I'm going to use Bandsaw Pro again. And I'm going to just add two control loops right in there, just so these edges stay a little bit sharper. Move that one out a little bit. Hit the mirror button. Accept that, deselect. Now if we go into subpatch mode again, we should have a pretty clean beginning of a perfume bottle, all subpatched. And let's just make sure if we go into the polygon statistics menu, we're all subpatches. We're all quads at this point. So no tris, no n-gons in this model, which is something we strive for. So I think this will be the end of part one. We're going to pick this up in part two, where I'm going to make the top spout and also the little straw that sticks into it. And then I think in the later video we'll make the liquid that fills the bottle as well. And there we go. Alright, well, we're just picking up where we left off in the last video. And as I went back and I looked at this, I forgot. I actually wanted the top of this to be kind of enclosed a little bit more. So if there was material or glass that made a smaller hole rather than this large hole right here. And that's okay, because it'll give us an excuse to kind of go back and adjust some of the the topology that we have on this object. So the first thing I'm going to do is just do a loop select on this object, and I'm going to dissolve that loop to get rid of that geometry. I just want to make sure we don't have any stray points, which we don't. And then I'm going to select this edge, do a loop select, and I'm going to drop it down as thick as I want that glass to be on the top. So maybe it's a little bit thicker, so that looks about right. And then I'm going to do another loop select, and then I'm going to use multi-shift, and oops, we don't want to do that. I'm going to shift these in, and essentially now we're creating this part of the top of the bottle that is a little bit smaller. So I don't know how small we want it, but that's probably about good right there. And go into full screen mode. While I have that, I'm just going to back that up a little bit so I could just make my control loops all in one shot. So I'm going to inset again, insert another shift, and then just inset that down. And that looks good. We do have an extra loop right here. So one thing I have noticed, you probably can do merge polys on a lot of these. I have a tendency to use dissolve. I always save before I do any dissolve operations, because I have noticed that Lightwave, at least in my version, it does crash occasionally. So I do have a tendency just to hit save before I go through and try to dissolve anything. And then I'm just going to go through while I'm looking on the inside of this to make sure that the geometry is the way I need it. And everything looks good, except we do need to add a few more control loops on the inside to have everything stay correct. So I'm going to use Bandsaw Pro again. I'm just going to clear that out, and I'm going to drag that loop up so it gets closer. And that's okay. You know, this is the inside of the bottle, so maybe the glass is rounded a little bit more. So that looks good. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Maybe just move that out a little bit more so that that inside corner gets rounded a little bit more. And that looks good. So if we go into subpatch mode again, even from inside, everything looks nice and smooth. If we look into the polygon statistics, we're still at a quad-only model. So this is a little bit closer to where I wanted to leave off on the last video. So that's good. I'm just gonna hit save. All right, and now I'm going to start building our little spout, or the nozzle that you push to get the perfume out. And normally I would start with an 8-sided disc, but in this case, because I know I'm actually going to be adding some more detail to the spout that we'll be creating, I'm going to bump that up to 16. And I have a tendency just to want to do that because when you're dealing with circles and holes relating to other objects, it's easier from a geometry standpoint, I think, sometimes to keep it a multiple of 4 in case you need to merge it into with like the rest of the bottle, which happens to be a 4-sided object. So I'm just going to size up the top of the spout so it's about the size we're looking for. And that looks pretty good. About there. Now I'm just going to go through and add some control loops to the top and bottom. That looks good. And then I'm gonna add that last control to the bottom, but I'm also going to extend out the bottom of this so it goes into the bottle itself. So I'm going to drag that in. And start dragging down. And again, I have a tendency to want to create my control loops as I'm modeling this way. But the nice thing about this is if you miss one, like if I just started moving down, I could always go back in and with Bandsaw Pro or something add it, later. But as long as we could remember, will probably be a little bit of a time saver to add them now. And then right before we finish this off, I'm just going to create a little hole on the inside of this object where essentially where the tube or the straw, well, I guess not straw, the little tube will stick out of. Drag that up a little bit and push that way up in there. We'll probably never see too far up in there, so I'm not going to go too far up, but I will make sure we have the proper control loops in there anyway, and then just finish that off. Save that. So it looks pretty good. Closing off a 16-sided object, as far as making it all quads, is pretty much the same as doing an 8-sided object. You just have a few more operations to do. So I'm actually going to do the same thing. So essentially we have quads, or not quads, 8-sided objects right now. And now I'm just going to cut these in half essentially. So it took like 2 more connects, but we all have quads down there. So this top of the nozzle right now it is all quads except for the very top end-gon, which we will take care of a little bit later. We're going to be making some adjustments to the shape of that, so it'll be easier to actually just do that later. And everything looks pretty good. It looks like the bottom part of this nozzle is a little bit too wide. It almost looks like it wouldn't fit in there. So I'm just going to select that part of the nozzle. I'm going to select all those inside objects and just grow my selection until I have this bottom part all selected. And I'm actually, one of the things you have to kind of get used to when you have a lot of control loops is if you selected it right there, it wouldn't be right because this control loop on the outside right here would not enlarge or shrink with it. So I'm going to do one more. You actually want that one selected. And I'm just going to use, actually it'd probably be easy for me just to use the size tool, and then I'll drag it up a little bit. So that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna move it so that's back where it's supposed to be. And then I'm just going to select those points and just drag them back down a little bit so it starts going inside the bottle a little bit more. And maybe drag the whole thing down a little bit. So we should be pretty good to go. Again, it's all quads except for that very top end gon. It's fitting right inside that hole. And now I'm just going to select those three. Actually, I'm going to select the 6 on either, or the 3 on either side of it, those points. And I'm going to drag those down to kind of create the little divot where your thumb or your forefinger would rest. That looks about good. I'm going to just smooth that out a little bit more. Select those 3 on their own. Drag that down a little bit further. And then select these 3 points that we didn't select last time. And just drag that down a touch, not quite as much. That may be the 3. Over there. Maybe just move those down a tiny bit. That looks pretty good. I think I might want to move it down a little bit more even. That's closer to what I was looking for. Now we can actually go through and connect those up. So just using the connect tool to connect those points together. And that looks a little bit better. And I think I'm going to drop actually that middle point just slightly. So it gets a little bit more of a nice curve in the center part. And that looks pretty good. If you go back into polygon mode, you could check in the statistics menu. At this point, you should be all quads for the top part. And you can see that it's kind of getting a nice shape so far on the top section. And that's the beginning part of our model so far. So I think this will be the end of part 2, and we will continue with part 3, adding more detail. Okay, so now we're just going to continue, and I'm going to go back into layer 2 where I have the nozzle. And we're going to make the area of the nozzle that has the little hole where the actual spray of liquid comes out. So I'm going to exit subpatch mode. We're going to use Bandsaw Pro again. And what I'm going to attempt to do right now is section off the area where we want that that initial hole to be, and I'm going to try to, I've added these two control loops. I'm going to try to set it up so those two control loops are pretty close to a square, and we could go back in and adjust that slightly, but I think I'm just going to lower that bottom one a little bit. Doesn't need to be perfect, but that looks pretty good. I'm going to accept that and deselect everything. And then what I'm going to do is just select one of those edges in the middle. I'll do a ring select and just hit connect, and that will put another control loop right down the middle. And now I'm just going to set up that center area for the beginning of our circle that we're going to create in there. So do some connects. Use a rounder to bevel that out a little bit. That looks good. I'm just going to use multi-shift to start setting up the inside. I'm going to do a very small inset first. And shift it in. And before I actually continue any further, I'm going to accept that, select that polygon, and I'm going to flatten it on the Z-axis, so facing forward. You can see it's kind of sticking out a little bit, so I'm just going to, with the move tool, just move that slightly back, and it looks like it was going down slightly, so I'm just going to move that polygon up a little bit. There we go, and just that looks good like that. And that's actually going to be our first control loop for this inset area. And now I'm going to go back to multi-shift and shift that back a little bit more. Do a little inset. And continue making the control loops. This would actually be the part where the actual spray comes out of, and I think I'm just going to shift that back a little bit and do one more small inset. Maybe shift that back also a little bit. And we could adjust that a little bit if needed. I'm going to enter subpatch mode again, and you can see it looks pretty good. Now this was the reason why I wanted to start off with a 16-sided cylinder in the beginning, is because that created a little bit more verticals. So it was going to keep the distortion down on the cylinder when we created this little inset area for the spray. But that looks pretty good like that. And then I'm just going to cap off or get that end-gon to become quads. Just connect that. I'm going to divide that and then connect across. And You can see at this point we're back to an all quad nozzle area. And for the most part that finishes off the top of the nozzle. And then we'll move on to the next part after this. Okay, now we're just going to continue and create the little tube that comes out of the nozzle. So I'm just going to exit out of subpatch mode for these and go into layer 3 and put the other layers into the background. So I'm going to start with a cylinder, or start with a disc to create a cylinder. And in this case, we could start with a 6-sided disc. We're not going to be adding any detail to this, so 6 would be okay, and we'll save a little on the poly count. And I'm just going to size this so it fits into the hole that we created out of that bottom part of the nozzle. I'm just going to size it down a little bit more. That looks good. I'm going to take the nozzle out of the background layer now and just select that bottom polygon. And I'm just going to use multi-shift to extend that down a few times. I'm just going to create a few segments, and we're going to use those segments to help control how the tube bends. Just one more segment. That should be good. I'm just going to adjust the position of that tube now, and I know some of the tubes in some of the perfume models will have like an end that's kind of angled, so I'm gonna rotate this a little bit so it's up, and then I'm just gonna stretch it a little bit taller so we don't get a tube that's too thin on the end. Move it back down a little bit. I'm just going to adjust the position of these other segments and just rotate them so they stay in line with the flow of the tube. Alright, that looks good. I'm just going to go in now and delete that top polygon and the bottom one as well. And then I'm going to go and under the utilities menu I'm going to use thickener again to give the tube a little bit of thickness. See, that looks good like that. Select that. Just going to make sure it did an okay job on the bottom, and you can see there's a little bit of distortion there, so I'm just going to select let's take a look and see what's going on in there. I think it'd probably just be easy to manually adjust those points. So I'm just going to use the drag tool drag those points out. And then just move some of these down a little bit more. Alright, that's going to be good enough. Once we subpatch this, it will smooth out any inaccuracies. Actually, I'm just going to fix a few of these points, line them up a little bit more. Alright, so now I'm just going to go through and create some of our edge loops at the bottom and end of the tube. I'm going to use the knife tool. I'm just going to slice right through. The knife tool is a good one to use in this case because it does go through the entire model. I'm going to do the same thing at the top. And if we enter subpatch mode now, you can see it's we're all quads for the tube. It rounds off really nicely, and there's a nice curve to the whole tube itself. Let's just check the bottom area, make sure that's okay. Yeah, it looks pretty nice. So we have the tube now. I'm going to turn back on the nozzle and the body. Tube fits right into the bottom of the nozzle. That looks good. And the body fits right around that. So I think that will complete this segment. Again, we're all quads, and stay tuned for the next part. So in this part, we're going to create the liquid that actually fills the perfume bottle. So I'm going to exit subpatch mode, and to create the liquid, we're going to start with a copy of the actual bottle itself. So I'm just going to copy that and go into layer 4 and paste that full model right into layer 4. And before we start doing any extra work on it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to determine where we want the liquid to be, essentially like at what level the liquid would be in the bottle. And I'm going to make an extra cut right across. I'm just going to use the knife tool, and I'm going to make that around, like it was a full bottle, say right around there, and just accept that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to essentially select the outside of this bottle. So I'm going to select the 4 bottom polygons, and I'm going to continue to grow the selection. So again, it was shift close bracket, and I'm going to grow this selection until it wraps all the way on the outside and wraps around into the inside to that cut that we just made right there. And I'm just going to hit the delete key. And essentially we have the inside of the bottle now. I'm going to hit the F key just to flip the polygons, and this is the beginning of the liquid on the inside. I'm just going to fill, I'm going to select these points right at the top, hit the P key to fill those, or rather make a polygon out of that empty hole that we had. And now we're just going to have a little tedious work. I'm going to have to connect up these points in this area. So I'm just using the L key to connect those. And then what I'm going to do is select these 3, connect those, connect that right there, this polygon looks like it's gone, but it's actually probably there. It's probably just a small error, and I bet once we finish it will reappear. And then I'm going to connect those three edges and these three edges. So essentially we ended up with that top polygon as if we had created it that way in the beginning. And now I'm just going to select these points, and I'm going to scale them out a little bit, just so, or stretch them out, just so they're in line with deselect those. Okay, just wanted to make sure everything was lined up correctly. Alright, so if we hit the tab key at this point, it will look kind of okay, except the only thing that is not going to be too accurate is you kind of want there to be a small meniscus. It's that edge of the liquid that actually kind of creeps up onto the sides of the glass. And that's going to be pretty easy to do now that we have this set up. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more cut with the knife tool really close to this edge. So I'm not going to put it right on top of it, but really, really close. And what that will do is that will keep a very sharp edge at the top. I'm not a big fan of putting cuts like directly on top of another cut, because I think that makes, if you had to reselect that edge or that loop and adjust it, it makes it really difficult. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just select these 4 polygons, and I'm going to drag them down slightly. And you can see what I'm going to do is I'll put the bottle into the background. You can see we're getting that nice effect now, as if we're getting that slight meniscus along the edges. And it looks like it's maybe tapering off a little more on these 2 edges, more so than the long sides. So I'm just going to I'm going to move those edges a little bit closer. Okay, I'm going to exit out of subpatch mode first. Move those a little bit closer to the edge. I think it's a little bit closer to what I was looking for. And if you want to increase that curve a little bit more, we could just go in and select these 4 polygons and just lower them a little bit more. That might be a little bit closer. That looks pretty good. So if we add the main bottle back to the background layer, you could see how it fits perfectly inside the bottle because we used the actual inside to create it. And we have the nice meniscus along the edges. If you really wanted to, you could probably go through and create another one right in the center. Alright, well I just figured I'll go in now and create that small meniscus around the tube that goes through the center. So I'm just going to turn off the background layer of the bottle, and I'm going to exit out of subpatch mode. And I'm going to start prepping this center area, and we're going to do this in a similar way as if we were making another bottle cap or another circle extrusion. So I'm going to connect those diagonals. I'm going to select that center point and use rounder to bevel that out slightly. Again, one rounding polygon and mesh density should be set to low. Accept that, and then select that polygon. Under the utilities menu, there should be a plugin for untangle that will turn that polygon into a circle, or at least close as a circle as it could be. And now I'm gonna set up the beginning of the meniscus using multi-shift. I'm going to inset that in slightly. And then do another inset, much smaller, and move that one up. And this will be the height of the actual meniscus. I'm just going to bring that down. That looks good. We'll probably have to go in and adjust the actual size of this, but I'm just going to make that N-gon all quads quickly while we're there. I'm just going to connect that up. Going to divide that and connect that. So it looks like the tube was maybe slightly off center, so we're going to need to adjust that also. So I'm going to just go into subpatch mode on the tube itself, and then go into subpatch mode here, and then put the tube back into the background layer. Select those 4 polygons. I'm going to grow my selection. And then just move it so it gets in line with the actual tube. That looks pretty close. That looks pretty good. It looks like it might be a little too big or a little too tall, so I'm going to just select those points on the top and just drop it down slightly. And now, at least I think proportionately, it looks a little bit closer to what you would see. And again, because we took care of that N-gon, we're all quad still. And that's it for the bottle so far.